Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's edition of Weekend Waypoints, production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, going to take you through Saturday's action around the SEC, take a quick peek ahead at Sunday's games. Should be a fun Sunday around the SEC. Count them, four rubber games on the schedule. Should make for a lot of fun today. Before we get into anything, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. All right. A fun Saturday in the SEC, kind of a low-scoring Saturday. There were some exceptions. A&M South Carolina, 15-12. Oklahoma put 14 on Vanderbilt. But other than that, honestly, considering how offensive the league is just generally, it really was a fairly low-scoring day around the conference, and maybe some of that's a little bit chilly this weekend, or at least it has been here in Georgia. So maybe that plays a role. I don't know, but regardless, not a big run-scoring weekend around the league. So interesting stuff there. It's led to some good pitching performances. It's led to some dramatic games. Low-scoring games oftentimes end up being a little bit closer. So that's been an interesting wrinkle this weekend. All right. Game of the day. We've actually got two today, both involving teams from the state of Texas. We'll do them in kind of chronological order of when they finished. The first one is Kentucky 5, Texas 4 in 15 innings. Pulling up the box score here. There we go. As you can see, a whole lot of zeros. Kentucky had so many in regulation, if you will, before extra innings, had so many chances to push, the deciding run across before Texas got it thrown in the eighth. This game was tied 3-3 for a while, and I felt like Kentucky always had pressure on. They always had something going. And it was a reminder of how this Kentucky team, while playing well, is not last year's team, because there were a couple of instances in which they didn't get bunts down. And last year, that was just such an automatic for them, was being able to be successful in trying to play small ball and moving guys around. Didn't happen in this game for so much of it. Although, ironically, that's how they end up winning the game in the 15th. Devin Burke's on first base. Bunt gets put down. It gets thrown away up the right field line. Devin Burks comes all the way around to score the walk-off run. So, the bunt giveth and taketh away in this game for Kentucky, but you wonder if this was last year's Kentucky team, this game would have been over a lot earlier just because the execution would have been better, but obviously we'll never know, and it didn't end up mattering ultimately because Kentucky gets the win. Kudos to both bullpens as I'll scroll down here to the pitching lines. Two guys in particular, Thomas Burns for Texas. We've talked about how Texas is still working with a relatively short pitching staff. I would say thin, but then almost has like a negative connotation in terms of quality. And I don't mean that. Like, the guys they really trust are really good, but they don't. The circle of trust is not very big right now. And so Thomas Burns is someone from largely who's been outside of that group this year, but he comes in, throws 4 really strong innings, ends up getting the loss, but it's an unearned run, not really on him there. He really pitched well. And then on the other side for Kentucky, Simon Gregerson, a guy who's had an up and down first 8 weeks of the season. 4 2/3 scoreless. That's about all you could ask for from him. Really held down the Texas lineup. And to the point where a lot of those extra innings, I was at my own game. I was actually at Georgia Tech yesterday. So I didn't have the video up the whole time, but I had the game tracker up, and it seemed like the top half of innings would go by really quickly. Gregerson was retiring Texas real fast. And then the bottom halves were a little bit longer because Kentucky had a little more traffic, but they, ultimately, like I was saying, couldn't quite cash in. Ultimately, they do. Both bullpens deserve a lot of credit. Maybe a season-saving win for Kentucky, not in terms of if they had lost that one, there's no chance of them being a postseason team or doing anything. But if you want to stay on track, on schedule, and not have to make a late run, this was a win you probably had to have, because you really couldn't go into today, if you're Kentucky, trying to fight off a sweep. That would have not been a great place to be at. But now, from the Wildcat standpoint, You're going into a Sunday where, yes, okay, you burned a lot of pitching yesterday, but you've got Ben Cleaver on the mound today. He's as good as anybody in their rotation in terms of being consistent in getting the game into at least the middle innings. So if you're Kentucky, you like where you're at in terms of, hey, we would have rather not had to use all those pitchers yesterday, but since we did, at least we have Ben Cleaver ready to go for today. And so you do have maybe a little bit of an advantage in that regard. We will see, obviously. Okay, going to flip off this screen, so my face is about to get real big. I promise, just for a second. There we go. All right, let's pull up the other the other game. That is Texas A&M 15, South Carolina 12. Line score kind of tells a story there. At one point, South Carolina was up 9-2 in this game. Actually, I take that back, 13-2. If you the 4-run top of the 6, but that's precisely about when A&M started its comeback. But it looked like this might be a run rule, and it's just like, okay, well, Texas A&M won the series, good for them, like they're still alive, yada yada. But they weren't satisfied with that. They come back kind of slow and steady. They get it to 12-7 going to the 9th, and then the 8-run inning did them in. It's a walk-off grand slam, as you see here, for Caden Kent. Earlier in the inning, it was a pinch hit grand slam for Hayden Schott. So all of the runs coming on 2 grand slams. Just a really tough way to lose it for South Carolina, but a really impressive way to win it for Texas A&M. And also because, look, I mean, Hayden Schott hits this grand slam, and suddenly the bases are empty, and South Carolina is still up 1. So if you're South Carolina, I am certain the message in the dugout, whether on the field, wherever it was conveyed, was, look, bases are empty now. We're still up a run. Just need 3 outs to get out of this thing. And so that gives you a little bit of a reset, but A&M keeps its foot on the gas, loads the bases again, and then gets the grand slam from Caden Kent. So really impressive stuff there. And look, A&M officially has life. 6-9 in the SEC, that's tenable. And it goes to show that doing what they did last weekend against Tennessee, when Mark and I on our podcast talk about the math in the SEC, that's the kind of stuff we talk about, where because they won a series they were not expected to win, on the road, by the way, it makes it to where they made up some ground. Now they've still got work to do. 6-9 is not where we thought they'd be. So they can't take their foot off the gas now and think that they've done it. We're officially back. But you did something you didn't expect to do. Now you consolidated that by sweeping South Carolina. Maybe we assumed a series win here, but a sweep certainly wasn't. You can never really assume a sweep in the SEC, at least for the most part. So the fact that they got it, I think, makes up a little more ground. I think they're in a decent spot here. If they keep playing well, to be that team we look at as they go to Hoover, whether it's a high-end 2 seed nobody wants to see, or, hey, they sneak into the hosting discussion, we'll see. But they've certainly done enough to earn that, to earn that faith moving forward, at least for now. On the South Carolina side, just another gutting loss. It's 2 in the series. I mean, they were so close to winning this series, frankly, and instead they get swept. And that's baseball. So, I mean, again, I've said it before on the show, there's no real sympathy in SEC baseball. It's just a cutthroat deal and a zero-sum game. But that's 2 tough losses. So you do feel for them a little bit that's the way that went. And it continues to be a tough season for Paul Mainieri and his group, 2-13 in the SEC. And, unlike, I think we mentioned this yesterday, unlike Missouri, although Missouri did play a couple of relatively close games yesterday, Missouri's played in very few close games. Even like South Carolina's been in a bunch of them, and they've all kind of gone the other way, it seems. All right, let me stop that, and then we'll flip over to some comments. Got some waiting. Randy Peterson, War Eagle looking for the sweep today against LSU. Yeah, big series win for Auburn there. Just a really nice comprehensive win yesterday too. It wasn't, wild, or it didn't involve a big comeback or a big lead or anything that really stood out as just a total game-changing performance for Auburn, in terms of, oh my gosh, this one guy put the team on his back. But it was just a solid, everybody did their job kind of win, starting with Cade Fisher giving them a really nice start, And I think that's just that. I think that's almost more impressive than games where it's like, I don't know, like Ike Irish just went nuts and hit 3 home runs, right? Like that's one thing. But this was just everybody did a job and they won the game. It was a 4-2 to win. Like that's impressive to me because it just means like they just played better all game. Listened to a lot of that on my drive home, or my drive from Atlanta back to the Athens area. So it just comprehensive win. Okay, Todd Harris, Sunday morning cup of Joe at the Masters. How about that? Well done, Todd. Good for you. He says finish strong. I promise I will, Todd. I'm working on it. And congrats on being at the Masters. That is I'm not a big golf guy, I have to admit. I appreciate the game and I'll watch on a weekend like this, but that being said, being at the Masters would be a cool experience. I'd love to have it someday just because it's one of those, it's kind of like, even if you're not into tennis, being at Wimbledon seems like it'd be just a cool thing to do, right? Like the Masters to me is kind of like that, where it's like, okay, this might not be necessarily my cup of tea on a day-to-day basis, but I can appreciate how cool this is, and I can get into this because it's the Masters and it's the best players in the world, all that stuff. So congrats, Todd, at being at the Masters this weekend. Nicholas Doherty, Ole Miss ran wild yesterday. Did they have an amazing scouting report, or was Tennessee just really slow to the plate, you think? I think it could be both, right? Because the scouting report could include that Tennessee is slow to the plate. And I will say, historically, Tennessee has been a team that is slower to the plate. Now, I don't have all of their times like written down and compared to other teams, but I just know historically that's been the case. There are kind of different philosophies about this when it comes to holding runners. There are teams that are very into it, and they'll have all their guys work from slide steps, and they will sacrifice maybe a little bit of the quality on pitches to the plate in order to mitigate some of the running game. Tennessee tends to be a team where it's like, look, yes, we're going to hold runners. Yes, we're going to, we're not going to ignore runners, but we're not going to give anything up in terms of your delivery, your rhythm, all of that stuff in order to further mitigate the running game. It's just going to kind of be what it is. Now, having not seen the game with my own eyes, I don't have like a really deep take on it, but I did see that and wondered the same thing, Nicholas. And I think it's probably both, but I do know Tennessee tends to be a team that's a little bit slower to the plate because they're not necessarily a team that looks to, do all those little things pitchers can do to be like that much more attentive to the runners. Good morning, vis-a-vis. I see you there. Todd Harris says, my Cats have now led in all 14 SEC games. I did not know that, Todd. That's a fun factoid there. Today is a big chance to get a strong series win to get UK to 7-8. Let's get it done. Yeah, I mean, with today's win, UK, you feel like UK's in a really good spot. To kind of we knew. Let me preface it by saying this: we knew this season was going to be a step back for Kentucky, and that's not a criticism. That's just the reality. When you had such a veteran group that did something that had never been done in program history, so. We knew a step back was coming, but it would be huge for Kentucky to, as I've said before, that the idea that Kentucky was just going to kind of slink back to being the Kentucky that we've known for the last however many years of SEC baseball, where it's like, okay, they have really good years, but then they kind of go back and they'll have a couple of years where they're not very good, and then they'll start to build up again. They have hit like a little bit of a new level. So it would be huge for Kentucky to get to a third straight regional, something that's never been done in Kentucky baseball history, and to continue to kind of knock down some of these walls that have existed for Kentucky baseball throughout its history. So I get that, some other programs that have annual national title aspirations might kind of scoff at the idea of like celebrating 3 straight regionals, but you have to understand the context of the history of some of these programs versus others. And so I say that to say, Todd, like staying on track to get to 7-8, or even just winning that game yesterday, like I said, to stay on track, like so huge as this team looks to push through and get to the postseason again. Sean says, I did my taxes. My dog had to go to the vet. My eggs were down 10 in the 6th, headed to a run rule. I need some good news to salvage my weekend. At least tell me one of the awful orange UTs lost. Sean, first of all, very good bit there by Sean, but well, I imagine if that were the case, Sean, I imagine it would have been one heck of a one heck of a bit of news to come back to once you plugged back into the game. Logan Crow, Cleaver versus Riojas. That's right. Yeah, Riojas on the mound, having not used him, it's going to be a good one. Totally agree. We'll see what happens in the bullpen after that for both teams, though. Yeah, it does feel like toss up in terms of, because they both burned a lot of bullpen yesterday. That's just is what it is. But yeah, with Cleaver and Riojas, both teams have to feel pretty good about what they have on the mound to start, at least. And I wouldn't be surprised. To see them both try to stretch those guys a little bit, just because even if they give up some runs, those guys are still probably the best option going through the middle innings. So unless one team is just an absolute laser show against one of those pitchers, I would expect them to be stretched a little bit. Ace Man, an old friend from last year on Weekend Waypoints, haven't seen a ton this year. Good to see you back. It says Gingham, 80 runs in the last 5 games for the Ags. Holy cow! I did not realize it was that prolific. Wow. All right. Scott McCrate says, McCrate or McCrite? I apologize, Scott, which one it is there. But great to see Gavin Keelan and Levi Clark back in the lineup. Looking forward to Game 3 today. Go Vols. Yeah, huge. Keelan had a big game. Levi Clark looks Levi Clark's kind of like a sleeper return guy, because he was so good. It's easy to forget, I think, how good he was early on, because especially early in SEC play, it was like, wow, Levi Clark's swinging the bat well, and hey, Jay Abernathy's swinging the bat really well, and hey, Dalton Bargo's getting hot, right? So like there was just a lot to look at for Tennessee. So I think it's easy to forget how good he was early on, and to have him back, huge, and a big rubber game today. Ole Miss has been really impressive to me this weekend. So and it would be a big win. If Ole Miss wins a series, we probably do need to start having a different conversation. At least I need to start having a different conversation about Ole Miss, and do I need to evaluate them as something more than what I've assumed they've been, which is, a nice regional team, right? Maybe a host. We have them ranked in the top 10, but I was still a little bit skeptical of, are they actually that good? And if they win this series, I do think we maybe need to consider that. But yeah, Scott, your larger point, though, totally true. Like, good to see them back in the lineup from a Tennessee standpoint. Just makes them that much deeper. All right. Garrett Charlton asks, think Gackle is a starter next weekend? Yeah, another tough start for Gabe Gackle. It was getting a little bit better in terms of giving them a little bit more, but yesterday didn't go great. Now, it is Georgia on the road, which is just a tough lineup and environment to deal with. So it's hard to necessarily, it's hard to weigh that against what an average weekend would be, but I do think it is something worth toying with, and I'm sure they are. DVH and Matt Hobbs are obviously have proven to be pretty effective at this whole coaching thing. So I do think it'll be evaluated. I also think it helps, especially if they win the series today, that they're still winning games for the most part. If they don't win the series, maybe it does start to be a situation where you're saying, okay, that was one of the better SEC teams on the road, and we just didn't have enough. What can we do maybe moving forward to put ourselves in a better situation? And maybe the answer does end up being something like shaking up the rotation. We'll see. But yeah, that all season has just been like an interesting subplot. I wrote about Aiden Jimenez. Like, it's a little bit early for it, but you just wonder if maybe if he continues to get stretched out as he returns from Tommy John, only 13 months removed right now. But, by the time the SEC tournament is here, he's been stretched out for 5 more weeks. Maybe is he someone you look at as a starter? I don't know. And then obviously there's the Gage Wood of it all. What do they get from him? They've got options. They've got the depth. And then, of course, the lineup is giving them a lot of cover. Even with Gackle not pitching that well yesterday, they still had a real chance to come back and win that game. Jordan Shields says, also interested in what Tony does today. Feels like the boys are not playing loose right now. Yeah, I'd say that feels about right. Yeah, I think that's well put, Jordan. It just doesn't feel like they're playing all that loose. I would agree there. Ace Man says, Aggies stranded 11 in the first 5 innings yesterday, thoroughly dominated the first half of the game, but couldn't get a timely hit. The comeback was cathartic. Yeah, for A&M, that has to be – I think you could see it in the way the team is just interacting with each other right now. Like, look, it's hard to look like a cohesive team that has fun playing together and is enjoying each other when you're losing. Like when A&M was really down, I got asked a lot about, does this team looks like they don't like each other. This team looks like they don't have any chemistry. And I would kind of say that, like, look, maybe that's true, but we're never going to be able to tell because we're not in the dugout. We're not in the clubhouse. And then B, when you're losing like that, it's never going to look like you guys really like each other. That's just not the way it works. Now, if they're winning, it does look like a fun dugout, and they've got great team chemistry and all that stuff. And so it's just kind of, I think that's just the nature of the game when you're playing well. I saw it with Georgia Tech yesterday. That looks like a super fun dugout, and a lot of it is just they're playing well. So, all right. Scrolling here. Yeah, Jordan follows up on the slow to the plate thing with Tennessee. Tennessee has always been slow to the plate, but brother Marcus is extremely slow. Marcus Phillips is a little slower to the plate. That's a good point. Like, Marcus Phillips specifically a slower guy to the plate. So I think it was just a matchup there for Ole Miss as well. All right. I am scrolling. Josh Willie says, it is nice this year feeling the Hogs are never out of a game. Came up just short, but could have won that game. Agreed. Like there were a lot of times the last couple of years where, 4-run deficits, 3-run deficits felt like 10 just because scoring runs was such a production for Arkansas. Pause 1 second for water. I promise water, not Mountain Dew, as I was accused of yesterday. Viciously accused of. All right. Sam Smith said Tennessee appeared to lack energy yesterday. It looks like they were too high after Friday. Yeah, like that could be. I mean, there is kind of such a thing as a hangover game where you put so much on the field in a certain game that you're a little bit kind of sapped, whatever, for that second game, and so if Tennessee came out and looked like a totally different team today, it wouldn't shock me, just because I do think there will be a little bit the message of a reset. Like, all right, look, I mean, yesterday was yesterday, today's today. We just have to play better. Fascinating. Really looking forward to that game today. All right, let me make sure. Make sure I got it. Ace Man says, sadly, I work nights, so I'm not typically awake to see Waypoints live, but couldn't miss this one given yesterday's game. Love the stuff as always, Joe. Well, thank you, Ace. I appreciate it. Night workers. Kudos to you. I did a stint as an overnight worker for reasons that it's a long story, but I did have a stint working overnight when I was in college, and I don't know how anyone can do that super long term. It was rough. When I started there, everybody was like, oh, you'll get used to it. You'll just flip your days around and it'll be fine. And that never happened. I was there a year and a half maybe, and I never got used to it. And then going to school on top of it made it tough. But still, just even if I hadn't been doing that, the overnight of it all was just I never got used to it. All right, scrolling to make sure I haven't missed anything here. Lincoln Ranger with a good question here. For teams in the middle to bottom of the SEC standings, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Texas A&M, does 13 SEC wins and top 35 RPI ranking get them into the NCAA tournament? Obviously, let me give the caveat that my colleague Mark Etheridge, who understands the bracketology stuff, he understands it better than I do and knows it like the back of his hand. He would appreciate me giving this caveat of like, we don't know. We'll have to see how the rest of the field plays out, right? But I think last year is a good example where we had 4 13-win SEC, 13 regular season SEC win teams upon arrival in Hoover, and they all got in. Now, varying levels of things, like LSU got to the SEC tournament title game. They were a no-brainer by the time the week was over, but all 4 of those teams got in. So I would say, generally speaking, yes, especially as the SEC now has gotten tougher, and I think everyone understands that. So a tentative yes, that would be enough to get them in. However, there are other wrinkles, the Big 12 is a weird league this year where like every team feels the same. So do they get more teams in? Does it squeeze another spot from somewhere else, right? Like, and I don't know if that'll happen or not. I'm not predicting it. That's just an example, but so we'll see. But I would be pretty confident with a top 35 RPI, 13 SEC wins in this SEC. You know, given that it has 16 teams instead of 14, and the two new teams are both good. I think that would probably be enough. Would be my guess. Very good question though. All right, Ace Man says, here's a wild question: if we, and he's talking about Texas A&M, somehow take 2 of 3 in Fayetteville, we'd be 8-10 in league play. We'd got to be ranked at that point, right? 2 road series wins over number 1. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, again, no hard and fast rules. Also, I'm only one of many voices, not many, several voices that weigh in on the top 25. But I think you'd have to, yeah, just based on the resume, I think you'd have to evaluate A&M as a different team than when they accumulated those 10 league losses, right? Or most of those 10 league losses. So yes, is my again, a tentative answer. I think they'd be ranked. Just given the resume, but who knows? We'll see. But yeah, tough weekend. 2 of 3 in Fayetteville. Not sure there's anybody right now in college baseball that I would have a ton of confidence getting 2 of 3 in Fayetteville. Sean says an overnight shift explains that LinkedIn profile photo. Thank you, Sean, for keeping me humble as always. I would also love to say that bad LinkedIn profile photo. For those who don't know, I do a radio show in Baton Rouge. The photo they use for me is from LinkedIn from, like, at this point, 12 years ago. So I'd love, Sean, to blame that bad photo on being an overnight worker. That was several years after. So that had nothing to do with it, as much as I would love to blame it on that. All right, let's get to hitter and pitcher of the day. Sean Miller may have just spoiled it there with his, although it's not going to be a huge surprise. You guys will be impressed. I mean, look how much bigger that font is. Look at Joe learning some things. Super high tech hitter of the day. Just all kinds of cutting edge technology coming at you here. This is what we call a Google Doc. The hitter day is Caden Kent, 4 for 5, 2 doubles, a homer. That walk-off grand slam. Easy choice for hitter of the day. Although for A&M, Blake Bender up 3 for 3, a homer, a walk, and a hit batter. Like that's a pretty good day too, getting on base 5 times. So it was a nice day. But Caden Kent, the hitter of the day. Other guys who made it here, Dalton Mayshore and Evan Stone for South Carolina. They were big and getting South Carolina out to that big lead. Richie Bonamolo Jr. in a big 4-1 win over Mississippi State for Alabama. Riley Quick was great. We'll talk about him in just a minute. But yeah, just to get that game, huge for Alabama, even that series. Again, that feels like another one of those coin flip series in the SEC where it's kind of two teams that are in a similar spot in the pecking order, jockeying for position. So a big rubber game there. Garrett Fry on the Mississippi State side, a 2-for-4 game with a home run out of the leadoff spot. For Arkansas, they came up just short against Georgia, but a few good games there. Cam Kojal, Kuhio Aloy, Gabe Frazier the freshman, in because of the injury to Nolan Souza, second game in a row where he has a really nice game. So he's giving them a spark as a player who's been pushed into a larger role. For Georgia, Rylan Zaborowski stayed hot, 3 for 4, double homer, 3 runs batted in. Robbie Burnett, also a good game there. In Oklahoma's 14-0 win over Vanderbilt. Jason Harris, 3 for 4 with a walk and 3 runs batted in. Easton Carmichael, 2 for 4 with a homer, a walk, and 5 runs batted in. They just put it on Vanderbilt yesterday. We'll talk about Kyson Witherspoon in a second, but impressive stuff there. That was, I felt like a coin flip series coming into the weekend. Yesterday's game was tighter than the final score suggests, but a 9-4 win is a 9-4 win. And then the game 2 days ago, the game yesterday was not close, 14-0. So they've outscored Vanderbilt 23-4 in 2 games. Really impressive there for the Sooners to protect their home field. Tennessee in that loss to Ole Miss, Gavin Keelan, 3 for 4 with a homer and a walk. On the Ole Miss side, Austin Foley, 2 for 4 with a homer. Hayden Federico, we talked about the stolen base prowess for Ole Miss, 4 stolen bases for him there. Florida took a doubleheader against Missouri, both ends of it. Again, Missouri was close in the second game, but just couldn't get that first win there. Now 0-15 in the league. Bobby Boser in game 1, Colby Shelton in game 1, big games there. Brendan Lawson in game 2. He had the walk-off hit, 2 for 3 with a walk and that walk-off hit. LSU, Stephen Milam, 2 for 3 with a home run hit by pitch in that loss to Auburn. Eric Snow, a big game for Auburn, 2 for 4 with a double and a home run. And that home run was to dead center. Impressive power there for Eric Snow, who's been a really nice piece of the puzzle for the Tigers this season. All right, I'm about to flip off this screen, so my face is going to get really big. So if you zoomed in, prepare yourself. Boom, there it is. All right, let's flip over to pitcher real quick. And this is another one that was a fairly easy choice. It's Kyson Witherspoon. A 7-inning complete game shutout against Vanderbilt, giving up just 2 hits, no walks, 6 strikeouts. Considering he was scratched the day before, we weren't sure exactly what he'd get or what he'd give Oklahoma. Impressive in any context, but especially in that context. So big game there for Kyson. 3 relievers at the top of this list, although the list is in no particular order, but just happens to be at the top of this list. We talked about Burns and Gregerson. Brad Rudis for A&M was huge in holding South Carolina off long enough to let the offense come back. Riley Quick against Mississippi State, 5 1/3 strong innings, 1 run allowed. Alabama had to have a good start from him. They got it. Colton Smith for Georgia, speaking of teams that needed a big start, he gave them one against the very stout Arkansas lineup. Good stuff there for Colton Smith in his first start of the season. In game 1 of the doubleheader against Missouri, Aiden King for Florida, 5 2/3 shutouts. I have Tony Newbeck of Missouri in here in game 2 of the doubleheader, not so much because 2 1/3 shutout innings is the most impressive thing in the world. It's more just a note that he's another guy who's on his way back from Tommy John surgery. And, if you go way back to 2023, when right before he got injured, he looked like he was going to be one of the better arms in the SEC that season. We'll see what happens. He's still building strength back up, but if Missouri's going to not only get a game in the SEC, but actually be able to play spoiler in a way that we thought they might at some point, Newbeck is probably going to have to be a part of it. So I think the start for him yesterday was an acknowledgement of, hey, we're building this guy up to be a starter moving forward. And then Cade Fisher, Auburn, gave up 1 run in 5 innings, his best start in Auburn uniform, best start of the season. So continuing to make some good progress with him after a relatively rough start to the season for him, the left-hander this season. All right, let's wrap up some comments here. Under the radar hitter of the day, honorable mention, Hayden Schott. Yeah, came in cold off the bench in a pinch hit grand slam to give A&M hope. Yeah, totally agree. With the length of a hitter of the day list, the pitchers list will be a lot shorter. College bullpens, am I right? Yeah, and it was a fairly low-scoring day. I was actually, when I started doing this, I was like, well, the pitcher list will be pretty lengthy, but I mean, not really. So it was kind of surprised me in that way. Lindsey Crosby, good to see you, Lindsey. Cade Fisher's really settled in after some short outings after the lat injury. Dutton and Fisher back-to-back in a weekend gives Auburn a chance to take down anyone despite the lack of premier stuff. Yeah, and that's Auburn baseball, right, Lindsey? Look, they'd love to have the next Casey Mize or Tanner Burns or what have you at the front of the rotation, but Auburn has had some really good teams that have been led by pitching staffs that just get the job done despite not necessarily blowing away hitters with the raw stuff. So it just feels very, very Auburn. And I mean that in a positive way for that to be the case there. All right, game of the day Sunday. Lots to choose from. Rubber games between Kentucky and Texas, Mississippi State and Alabama, Georgia and Arkansas. But the game of the day for me is Tennessee and Ole Miss. Like I said earlier, this could be a season-altering series win for Ole Miss if they can pull it off at home, where you start to really have to maybe adjust upward the expectations for Ole Miss and what they can be this season. We've talked about some of the limitations they have. They're similar to Auburn maybe in terms of the rotation has been solid, but it's not like they're out there. They don't have a Liam Doyle, right, or a Kyson Witherspoon. So what they've been able to do is impressive. The matchup will be Mason Nichols, not Riley Nichols. I don't know who Riley Nichols is. Mason Nichols for Ole Miss, and in the freshman duo of Coons and Krenzel for Tennessee in that piggyback situation there. Should be a lot of fun around the league today. Hope you enjoy the baseball. It is as I look outside, a beautiful day here in the Athens area. I will be at the Arkansas-Georgia rubber game today, and cannot wait. Should be a fun Sunday around the SEC. Quick programming note, by the way. Next weekend is Easter weekend, and that means if you're familiar with that, that means a lot of games Thursday, because there are teams that'll play Thursday, Friday, Saturday to get off on Easter. There will still be some series, however, that are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So next week is one of the bonus weeks where we will get a Weekend Waypoints Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So just make sure you have a heads up that I will be doing an extra show on Thursday to prep you for the weekend, but then you will still get the 3 regular shows, so a bonus show next week. So there's that. Scott makes a good point there. Masters Sunday and afternoon baseball, sweet sports day. Agreed. Going to be a good sports day. I will probably have the final round of the Masters kind of on a second screen there while I'm in the press box in Athens. So, all right, folks, have a good Sunday. I will talk to y'all again Thursday morning to preview next weekend with Weekend Waypoints. See y'all.